We're getting there. We're getting there. Good evening, everybody. Welcome aboard. Let's do some Torah learning. It's exciting to be in another week, especially because the next question I'm about to ask, what's going on in the Yiddish calendar, is jumping out of the text because there's so much to talk about what's going on in the calendar, as well as this week's Parshah, which will be our second step. And of course, for one practical, relevant life message, which will hopefully somehow tie in this week's Parashah to this part of the calendar to ensure that we are feeling empowered, motivated, and on fire, doing what we need to do in order to bring Mashiach into our reality, to make sure that we see, take it from Miyad immediately, the big news, the big shofar, and Mashiach Tzidkenu. So this is our mission. Got our work cut out for today. Let's start off with talking about what's going on the calendar, and the mics are open, please. Anyone want to weigh in what's going on this week on the calendar? Please help me out. Not all
You
at
excited,
once.
the Rebbe?
Oh, Gimel Tammuz coming up, which is not tomorrow night, but Wednesday night, Thursday. Gimel Tammuz, big deal, big deal. The day of a major Iskashus, a Yemilul of the Rebbe, and it's a major part of this week's calendar. And today's a big day on the calendar, which is
Rosh Chodesh and
go
tomorrow
ahead.
Chodesh.
All the women, all the Yiddish women should definitely know about Rosh Chodesh. It's a day you're supposed to take it more easy. I remember as a kid, my mother would never do the laundry. I'm not sure if it's still an ongoing minhag. But she would load the machine and tell us to push the start button, and then we would do the laundry because we pushed the button, even though she loaded the machine, took out the machine. That was my mother, plastic, and I know. There's an idea, yeah. Rosh Chodesh is a big day, and today was Rosh Chodesh, the first day of Rosh Chodesh. Tomorrow is the second day of Rosh Chodesh, which means that as we stand right now, we're in the final hours of the month of Sivan, and although it's Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, today was Lamed Sivan. Lamed Sivan is a big day. It's the height, the peak of the month, the third month of the calendar month, starting from Nisan Iyar Sivan. So it's Yitzias Mitzrayim, Sfira Sa'omer, and Matan Torah. The third month is the month of Shalom, the month of peace. Why so? Because as we spoke about it a lot, the number one is great. There's no machlokes, there's no arguments when you only have one opinion. But that doesn't know, you don't yet know what happens when it becomes a difference of opinion. And it doesn't yet take into account the colorful world Hashem has created. Different personalities, different interests, different talents and gifts. And that's when number two comes into the scene, and there's more than one. And unfortunately, that doesn't always come out clean and sparkly from the outset, but it certainly is the vehicle by which one grows. And that is the gift of two. And the number three is the number that is and harmonizes the two opposites, which creates a brand new reality, a reality of a we, of the two coming together, which is Shalom. And that's why Matan Torah is very much associated with the number three. So today being Lamed Sivan, the peak of that third month, is a big deal. And it's from there that we move into the month of Tammuz on the regular calendar, as in before Chassidus, before Chabad Chassidus. Tammuz is generally associated with Shiva Asar Tammuz. It's the fast of Tammuz. And it's a sad day. It's a day that there's a tragedy, more than one tragedy, 5 tragedies and more. But Shiva Asar Tammuz is only one of the days, and as we'll talk about as we get closer, it's actually a hidden goodness in that day. And some of the revealed goodness has already been shown to us in the month of Tammuz in recent history. And that's why Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, starting from last night and today, going on from tonight and tomorrow, is the day where we mark and we gather our koyach to be able to get in charge into the month of Tammuz full of hope, full of confidence, and knowing that even though sometimes Tammuz has been a time of the lack of clarity, has been a time of troubles for Yiddish people, we come to go into the month of Tammuz with confidence, knowing that Hashem is in our team, and we will see open and revealed goodness in the here and now. So this is the month of Rosh Chodesh that we're starting now, the month of Tammuz, very important month. And besides being Rosh Chodesh, we're going to talk about Gimel Tammuz. We're also going to talk about Dalet Tammuz, which is a big deal. Dalet Tammuz not half as big as Gimel Tammuz, but Dalet Tammuz is also a big deal, not less than Rabbeinu Tam's yard site is around Dalet Tammuz, but also in recent history, Mendel Futterfest passed away 1 year and 1 day. after Gimel Tammuz. So in Dalet Tammuz, Tafshin Nun Hey. So you're to remember the Futvas, very, very special chassid, almost like a breath of the previous generations that almost got inserted in our generation. I was very lucky that Remendel stayed in our house when he came to visit once when he came to visit Manchester, and I vividly remember getting a candy from a sweet. It was a yellow sweet, but it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. So my parents went around to tell him whether or not he should be eating the sweets. I don't know what they would have said if they were up, but he was sleeping downstairs because he couldn't come up the stairs. It was very hard for him. And we would come down early. The rules were back in the day that you had to play downstairs in the morning until everyone else woke up. So as we came down the stairs, that day we didn't realize that we'd be in a different setting, but remember we were supposed to be quiet. He was up and running. 6 o'clock was like late for him. So he was very happy to see us and he's asking us about what we were doing and he was very impressed and he gave us a sweet, each one of us. But Remendel was one of those Hasidim who lived, breathed, Ambus Yisrael, dedication to Hashem, and absolute confidence in knowing what Hashem tells us to do, we can do it. Now, he didn't have an easy life. More importantly, his work that he did years before he became a Shvia, he worked the black market. He was a fantastic salesperson, and he was 2 feet on the ground, very, very smooth, very, very gifted individual, but so committed and so much bitachon in Hashem, and so much love for a fellow Yid, to the extent that he had no problem telling somebody a rebuke with the most deepest love it would come across and it would be felt. Halavai, we could do the same thing. And his memory should be a bracha for us, and we should it should be a good to better. Should be an aliyah of kashmir. Let's talk a little bit about Gimel Tammuz, because Gimel Tammuz is by far the highlight this week. Start off by making a big shout out because on Wednesday evening there will be a Farbrengen. If I'm not mistaken, this is a joint Farbrengen of pretty much all the Chabad organizations, including the Sheikh Chabad and Chassidim and Beis Menachem and everyone else together. And there is going to be a fantastic Farbrengen, a surah and Farbrengen, marking Gimel Tammuz, encouraging us to take the koiches in Gimel Tammuz. And I just want to say that the speaker this year is a very dear friend and chavrus of mine. So I'm super excited that we're going to have Rabbi Willem from Manhattan coming to Farbrengen here in Manchester. It's a bit of a dream to see him in here, but it's worth coming. It's worth listening to. I'm not sure if it's going to be recorded or not, but it's definitely something worth coming to listen to. But that's Wednesday night. Let's talk about why Gimel Tammuz a little bit is special on the calendar. So historically, Gimel Tammuz was the day Shemesh Begiving Doim, when Yeshua came into Eretz Yisrael and he was fighting the war of Givon, and he was chasing the enemy, and it looked like they were not going to have enough time in the day to finish off the war. Now, halachically, there are rules of war and engagement, and the biggest rules of war are dictated not so much by politics, what you can get away with. It's not even dictated by the kedusha, the holiness of what it is that you're fighting for. The most biggest factor of war is the rules of pikuach nefesh. Pikuach nefesh becomes a major part of how generals are supposed to decide how to proceed. And all political leaders are halachically bound by those same set of rules and need to defer to those who are professionals in war and strategy and knowing and understanding what's safe and what's not safe, how to decide how to proceed even with the politics. And this is a major issue that the Rebbe spoke about a lot with regards to Eretz Yisrael. And even if it's the holiest place or the least holiest place, I think the ones the Rebbe explained that if the discussion was whether or not we should hold on to the Kosel Hamaravi, the holiest spot we have in Eretz Yisrael, if the question was a question of Pikuach Nefesh versus the safety of even one individual versus the Kosel Hamaravi, there's nothing to talk about. The stone wall doesn't come first, unless it's the other way around, that by sacrificing the Kosel Hamaravi, that will create an overall weakness that could make even more danger down the line. So when it came to deciding whether to finish a battle or to leave it on hold, the most important question was, if we don't finish this war now, what is the net result going to be? Which basically means the halacha is very against ceasefires. Ceasefires basically means let's stop, let's let both sides regroup, and unfortunately, more times than not, it means rearm. which effectively means we're going to have another round at this battle sooner or later with renewed energy, which is not a good recipe for safeguarding people's lives on both sides of the fight. And therefore, ceasefires are usually shunned and not looked good upon from halacha. And instead, the answer to finishing a war has to be that the enemy understands that they were defeated. So if somebody comes to start up with David HaMelech, David HaMelech knows that there's no way he can just safeguard the borders because it's gone quiet. He must insist on pursuing his enemy so that the enemy understood that they tried to start a fight, they lost, and they lost so badly they won't try again. Perhaps a good example for this would be the difference between the end of the First World War and the Second World War, where after the First World War, although Germany lost, the people on the streets of Germany didn't understand that they lost, which is why it didn't take so much longer, Rahman al-Islam, for the population there to be rallied to believe that they still had a very good chance of winning. And the Second World War ended when the people on the street, not just the generals and not just the politicians, but down to the lowest rank and file, understood that the war had been completely lost and that they shouldn't ever try and pick up such a world war again. And that's how they were completely defeated. So in the case of Yeshua as well, and by the way, this is true for every time Israel has a battle, calling for a ceasefire is very, very non-halachic. It's not good. It's not good. The way the Rebbe used the mashal was, if chas v'shalom, someone had to have an operation, and a weak-hearted person walks into the operating theater and sees the surgeon with a knife, and the poor person's bleeding, and he gets worried. He says, take a break. Stop now, stop the surgery now, let the person recover, and then continue the surgery later. And the next time the same thing would happen, you'd walk into theater again and see the person bleeding and ask them to delay the second half of the surgery to a later date. Clearly, bleeding in a surgery is not good, but it's much better than not having the surgery or delaying part of the surgery. Anybody who's thinking obviously understands that's not okay to pause in the middle of a surgery just so that the weak-hearted shouldn't fall apart. And the same is true if there's something that has to be done, even if it means battle. It's very important to carry out till the end, and the war is not over until it's over, until the enemy who incited and is trying to destroy us understands that they absolutely shouldn't try again. So Yeshua davens to Hashem and says, if we finish the day and the battle is not won, the result is going to be that the enemy will have time to rearm and it won't be good. And Yeshua davens that there should be a miracle. And the miracle takes place on the third of Tammuz, Shemesh begivoin doim, that the sun stops in its orbit and the day extends itself long enough for the battle to be won. So they don't have night vision in those days, but they were able to win the battle, and that becomes a miracle of Gimel Tammuz, where it's about to become dark, and Hashem makes sure that the battle can be won and the light continues to shine. And for many generations, Gimel Tammuz was the day of Shemesh B'Kivon Doim, and in the times of Tafresh Pei Zayin, which is 1927, it's not that long ago, relatively speaking, the Friediger Rebbe in Gimel Tammuz was still in prison from the 15th of Sivan, and it was this day on the 3rd of Tammuz where he was told that he would be sent off to exile to a faraway place called Kostroma. And at the time, it looked like a terrible decree. It looked like the nerve center of the entire Yiddishkeit underground that the Friedi Rebbe was single-handedly running was under enormous threat. And how would it survive if the Friedi Rebbe would be sent away? It was bad enough that he was in jail. I mean, they were happy he was coming out, but how would it be? And how would it be able to work? And it turns out, in hindsight, that actually it was a tremendous bracha. And more importantly, Gam Oivav Yashlim Imoy, the enemy, not only hadn't been able to carry out their naughty plan, their terrible plan, where they were trying to get rid of the Friedi Rebbe totally, chas v'shalom, they had no choice and no option but to help out the Friedi Rebbe. And a very short while later, less than 2 weeks later, on Yud Beis Tammuz, the Friedi Rebbe was completely set free. And in hindsight, we now know Friedrich told us that he actually saw that Gimel Tammuz was the day where he was exonerated from a death sentence. So it turns out that the light of Gimel Tammuz is the light that teaches us of the greatness of Hashem, even when we don't see it. Years later, Tafshin Nun Dalet. What is this? Is that? Well, okay. Sorry. In Gimel Tammuz, the day that the Rebbe's Istalkos, is a very difficult day for all of Klal Yisrael. And I remember being in school at the time where everybody was involved, even the non-Chabad teachers would come and check in regularly. It was a very, very difficult day. A very difficult day when the Rebbe's presence was lost to us. It was almost understood that the entire continuation of Lubavitch, of Hasidim, of Chabad, was at stake. Yet we turn back and we look at where we are today and we ask ourselves which part of Chabad Lubavitch's success is normal or natural. And of course, we can explain the Rebbe's leadership style has things that we can rationalize. The bottom line is that at the end of the day, this enormous amount of brachas, of super rational, beyond understanding brachas that are flowing and helping us continue to grow. And this investment is not just by the way, it's intentional. And it's up to us to notice how much the Rebbe is very much involved in what's going on in our life. And more importantly, these gifts and this investment is a call to action, where Hashem is asking us, or us, the students, the receivers of the Rebbe's kindness and the Rebbe's education and the Rebbe's way of approaching a modern world, is a teaching that has been given to us, asking us to step up so that we take it on board and we live by it. And it's a day like Gimel Tammuz where we want to strengthen our commitment to doing that. Strengthen our joy in knowing that we are absolutely not just surviving, not just thriving, we are the winning team that Hashem is relying upon to make this work. So as we get into that frame of mind, it's already Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. It's an important time to take a few moments to take stock. What am I doing in my life? And where do I want to compliment myself on the commitment, on the investment, on the good things doing, to make sure that the good things that I've done since last year are upheld. And that's done mainly by celebrating those wins. And in that spirit, I'll also look at the things and the areas where I can strengthen and throw myself in more to the encouragement that the Rebbe always gave to us, the hiskashrus, the connection, which, by the way, I've just learned this with my daughter, one of the mitzvahs of the Torah, it's a mitzvah asim in the Torah, l'dof kapoy, to cleave and become close to Hashem. It's a mitzvah in the Torah to connect to Hashem. And Chazal ask, how is it even possible to hold on to Hashem? We've never seen Hashem, what it looks like. And the Gemara answers, through being connected and working on that connection, to connect to the tzaddikim, Talmidei Chacham of our generation. That's how we connect to Hashem. Effectively, having a skashrus, making sure that we strengthen our bond with the Rebbe, is the fulfillment of a mitzvah min HaTorah. Super powerful. So when it comes to Gimel Tammuz, there are certain things that we should do, whether you light a candle, certainly if you light a pan, and to take a few moments to do an extra mitzvah in the lead up to support the institutions that the Rebbe set up, and very importantly, to think about how we can further that influence. It's coming up this Wednesday night, Thursday. For those of us who are able to make the Farbrengen, I would strongly encourage you to come. And for the rest of tonight, we're going to do one of the sichas and the messages, the life that the Rebbe taught to us that we're going to learn from this week's Parsha. Now, it happens to be that this week's Parsha is Korach, not a spy story like we had last week, but it's also one of those fantastical stories that everyone loves because we know the story inside out. It's fascinating. And the timing in this week's Parsha perhaps is one of the most amazing things of how the Parsha works out. The name of the Parsha is Korach, and Korach is named as the individual who brings to us the story. And although in this week's Parsha he's remembered for a non-good thing, he's also mentioned elsewhere in Tanakh as the great-grandfather of some of the Levium, who served singing in the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash. But Korach in this week's Parsha stages a rebellion in the Midbar. And don't forget, just to put this in historical context, less than 2 years earlier, we were Mitzrayim. Moshe Rabbeinu does the 10 Makkos, the 10 plagues, brings us and leads us out of Mitzrayim, cross the Red Sea, sings Shir with us, brings us up to Har Sinai. We've got manna falling from heaven, water from the well of Miriam. We're cushioned and cocooned in the clouds of glory. And right after, just under a year, we move towards Eretz Yisrael. And in 11 short days, boom, we're on the border. Kadesh Barnea, we send out the spies. Oh boy, we made a mess. We made a mess. We wrote about this last week. Right after that story of the spies, we're now going to stay in the desert. We now know we're going to have 40 years ahead of us, and things start going from bad to worse. And this is where Korach kicks in. And he says to Moshe, hold on 1 second, hold it. Now, the background of the story isn't front and center necessarily. The background of the story is that Korach had a personal jealousy that caused him to go off the beaten track. Who was Korach? Korach was Moshe Rabbeinu's first cousin. And Moshe Rabbeinu's father and Korach's father were brothers. But Moshe Rabbeinu's father was the eldest of the brothers. And Korach was the second eldest, Yitzhar. Korach's father was second eldest. Now, Korach felt that if he's the child of the second oldest brother, after Moshe and Aaron get the two most important jobs, king and Kohen Gadol, next job should be his. But when it turns out that the next job isn't given to him, instead the next job is given down the pecking line, some other cousin who's the son of a younger brother gets the honor. Korach is fuming. He's really upset. And when a person gets upset, certainly when it's jealousy, some things that don't always have to make sense start to make sense so much. And it becomes so important to Korach to take down Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership. And he goes to tell him it. He rallies up not just a few people. He rallies up top great leaders of the people. Sanhedrois, Dayanim, on the highest degree of Shever Reuven, has 250 Dayanim on his back, with him and his team. And Korach himself's no small guy. He's extremely learned, and he's also very, very wealthy. And Korach says to Moshe, why do you have to lead? Why do we even need a leader? Why do we have Aaron, the Kohen Gadol? We're all holy. We all heard Torah being given from Sinai. And as the noise gets louder and louder, at first Moshe Rabbeinu tries to quieten them down and deal with them and work with them and figure something out. He quickly realizes not only are they not willing to listen, they're interested in bringing in more and more Yidden into their terrible plot. And at this point, Moshe Rabbeinu pivots and changes tracks. He says, you know what? If this is where you're headed, we're going to have no option but to create a standoff. 250 leaders, each one of you think you can replace Aaron and you could be the Kohen Gadol? Aaron's greatest honor is bringing the Keteris, the incense. Do it. Try it. Have it. But I'm warning you, if you're not supposed to be doing this, it doesn't go down well. Keteris is one of the things that's very powerful. It's very, very deep. And it brings tremendous brachas when it's right. But when it's wrong, when a person's not supposed to do it, it's deadly. And this was Moshe Rabbeinu's challenge to them. And unfortunately for them, they walked straight into it. The next Moshe Rabbeinu tells me, no, let's not do it now. Let's sleep over it. Hopefully by the morning, you'll be in a much better place. But all night, they were winding each other up. Come the morning, and that's exactly what happens. They bring forth a Keteris. Moshe Rabbeinu says to all the people, back away from Korach. And of course, Korach had two of his closest cronies who were Moshe Rabbeinu's arch enemies from day one. They were winding Moshe up, Dasan and Aviram. And Moshe Rabbeinu tells all the Jewish people a big announcement: stay far away from these people. They're not only instigators, but they are about to get a punishment that's never been seen before. And this is where you say timing is everything. Because you could, well, anytime there could be an earthquake. But the earthquake was exactly at the moment Moshe Rabbeinu said. And exactly where Korach, Dathan, and Abiram, their families were stood, with all their belongings getting swallowed into the ground and covered up underneath. And all the 250 of these Sanhedrois, great Dayanim, who brought the Keteris, were consumed with a fire. And it was clear to everybody that they were absolutely wrong. It was obvious that Moshe Rabbeinu was right. Korach and all his cronies were absolutely wrong. It was so shocking, and the noise was so deafening with the screams. But right after that, you'd imagine things settled down. They didn't. Instead, people started blaming Moshe and Aaron for setting up Korach and the 250 elders, and it's their fault why they had set them up to die with the Keteris. More importantly, people started saying that the Keteris is such a deadly weapon. Don't forget, Aaron had lost two of his sons to the Keteris when they had the inauguration of the Mishkan. Now 250 elders passed away over the Keteris. Hashem was very upset to hear that after all this, they still complained and they still turned their finger against Moshe, and a plague broke out amongst the people, and people were dropping like flies. And Moshe Rabbeinu tells Aaron, go and grab the Keteris and use the mitzvah of Keteris to stop the plague in its tracks. And Rashi brings down how Moshe sends Aaron. Aaron goes into where people are there, where the epidemic is spreading, and stands between those who are still alive and those who aren't, and the plague stops. And Rashi explains that the background behind that, the spiritual side of that story is that Aaron has a standoff with the Malach HaMavis, where Aaron says to the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, you must stop. In the power of Keteris, I do not allow you to continue taking the life of any of the people here. And the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, turns to Aaron and says, thank you very much for your instruction. You're right, you have the power of Keteris, but I'm here on behalf as an agent of Hashem. And Aaron says, so what? You still must stop. And the angel says to Aaron, thank you very much. You come on behalf of Moshe, I come on behalf of Hashem. Who should we listen to? And Aaron doesn't budge. And he says, you know what? Moshe will never tell me anything, to do anything that's not like what Hashem wants. And if Moshe sent me here, it must be that's what Hashem wants. And then Aaron says to the Malach HaMavis, Moshe is right now talking to Hashem at the tent of meeting at the Oil Moed. Let's go together. And they do. And Hashem concedes. He says, you know what, Malach HaMavis, Moshe is right. In half of the Keteris, he is atoned and therefore settled down. And that means the end of the plague. And to the Yiddish people, that was also a demonstration that the Keteris itself isn't a deadly force. It's bad behavior. It's disregarding Hashem that's deadly. And if the Keteris is a super energy, then we have to be even more careful when we use that. It's a bit like the power in family that is so powerful. It can create a fellow human being. It create another generation. And that's exactly why it's so important to have so many rules and regulations about what's kosher for marriage, what's not kosher for marriage, how relationships will thrive in a godly way. This is the nuclear energy, so to speak, of Kedusha, of holiness. But that's not enough. Hashem wants also all those shovels made out of copper that the 250 elders used, would cost them their life, to be beaten down and to be making a cover for the Mizbeach as a reminder that the people should be careful and remind themselves not to make the mistake that was made by Korach and his leadership. And in addition, also, Hashem buffers up Aaron HaKohen's connection to Hashem by instructing Moshe to take a staff, the walking staff, of each of the leaders of each of the Shvatim, including Aaron on behalf of Shevet Levi, to take all 13 staffs and put them inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. And the next morning, Aaron's staff had blossomed and grown shkedim, almonds, as a sign of life and quickness. The Kohenim's connection to Hashem was determined not by Moshe Rabbeinu's choice, not by Aaron's choice, but by Hashem's choice itself. And the reason why Hashem would have used almonds is because they blossom, they ripen quickly. And the message is that the brachas of the Kohenim are high-speed brachas. And equally, people mess with the kahuna and challenge the kahuna, the retribution comes also high speed. the end of the Parsha, we also learn about some of the gifts that were given to the Kohanim, the different matanas from grain and from wine and from oils, as well as the firstborn sheep and cattle and other matnas kuna that are included in this week's Parsha. So this is Parshas Korach. Now, Parshas Korach is a fantastic Parsha because obviously it's got a very exciting story in it, but it really carries a lot of message, challenging Moshe, understanding that the differences in this world are godly. And the fact that different people have different roles doesn't make one better than the other, but the roles are still sacred. And unity doesn't mean ignoring differences, but treasuring differences is what real unity is. Some of the major messages from this week's Parsha. We're going to ask the following question. I'm going to ask everyone to please, who feels comfortable, anyone who feels comfortable, to unmute. What advice would you offer parents or teachers to help them get through to their students? Now, you could say Torah classes from today till 1,000 years and more. You can teach parenting tips and skills. Our question is specific as to not just what are the important things that kids must learn, or what are the important things that teachers must do. We want to know if a teacher or a parent is struggling to connect with their student, a child. What advice could you share with them to make sure that the bridge is flowing, to make sure that the information and the education is being received, not just, I think the word is, don't just dump information. What can we do to help and make sure that the student and the recipients are receiving and that the teacher and parent are getting through to the student? Question mark. We're looking for suggestions.
Always be honest. Be
Ooh,
absolutely honest. Tell the truth. Don't dress it up. And
wow.
you're asking two different questions because parents would not be the same as teachers because parents hold a different level to the ones that teachers do in class, even though parents are the first teachers of their children.
Do parents have to say the truth?
Well, if you're
I'm
a
sorry, I was joking.
abiding Jew, of course
Absolutely.
you would. You
Yes,
have to. If you don't tell the truth to each other and to your children, what are you doing? And
correct.
and teachers can be honest with parents, truthfully, but in a way that the parents will accept it. That doesn't mean not truth. It means saying it in a way which is positive and it doesn't leave the parents with a bitter taste in their mouths because their children aren't learning or retaining information.
Yeah, so packaging it right. But the
Yeah,
truth element, being able to be honest with students or children is a big part of being able to get through to them.
yeah.
Very important. I actually didn't think of that, but now that you said it, I'm taking that on board. Absolutely. Very powerful. Very powerful. We're looking for more suggestions. What else could we advise parent teachers? By the way, I'm a parent, Baruch Hashem, so I'm looking for this advice. I'm very open to hear. Anyone else want to jump in?
Come on, everybody. Jump. Come on.
No, it's okay. It's okay. People are probably thinking. I
No, I
just want
want
to
to
say,
learn. I want to
yeah,
learn what
we're
other
going to learn a
people.
lot. I want to say that this question remains open. And if during the next 25 minutes, if we come up with any suggestions, please unmute and speak up because this is what it's about. But we're going to take this on a discussion where we're going to explore Moshe Rabbeinu as a teacher
Mm.
because Moshe Rabbeinu was also a teacher. And we're not so much going to differentiate between teacher and parent. For the sake of today, we're going to assume that parents are the most responsible teachers of every child. And they also hire parenting help called teachers. But really, all of teaching is really doing the teaching on behalf of the parents because the parents are the ones who are really supposed to be responsible. Now, every rule's got an exception. That's generally the gist of where we're going.
Wait,
But we
oh,
are going to differentiate between Moshe Rabbeinu's role as a teacher, and Moshe Rabbeinu took that very seriously, but Moshe Rabbeinu had additional roles besides of being a teacher.
yes, but
And
can I
what we're
just
going,
say that
please,
Moshe Rabbeinu had Hashem to help him know what to do and what to say to the people and parents they can look for somebody else, but parents are often put in a position of having to um, find the answer very, very quickly. With it's not saying that Hashem isn't there, but they have to answer that child or that student, that teenager, fairly quickly. Moshe Rabbeinu had that help all the time because Hashem was there.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is a very good point. If you don't mind, I'm going to borrow that point, make two disclaimers or two qualifiers. Number one is nothing we're saying today is passing judgment on anybody.
Right.
We're not going to pass judgment. And I'm going to say anybody, I'm going to ask you to forget everybody else. We're not passing judgment on ourselves. We're not going to decide today whether we were good or bad parents. I'm going to take for granted that each and every one of us who have ever had children can safely tell ourselves that we cared about our children. And even when we made mistakes, not if, even when we made mistakes, we still cared about our children, and the mistakes were made by mistake. They were made intentionally. That's why they're called mistakes. So we're not going to pass judgment. And more importantly, this is, I'm going to say, I think Mrs. Abrams made a very good point. Moshe Rabbeinu had a direct line to Hashem. And what we're learning here are tips and tricks because we expect human beings to not get it right. Our children weren't born with a user manual, and if they were, we would never read it. And more importantly, we weren't born with a user manual, so that we don't even know ourselves, let alone know inside out what our children need. And I would just share a mashal I once heard from Rabbi Korf. He would say that parenting is like going boating. In a car, you got forward and reverse. In a boat, you don't have no forward nor reverse. You got a right oar and a left oar, and you pedal. Sometimes the boat veers a little to the right. You do a bit more left. It goes to the left, do a bit more right, and that's how you go forward. A bit right, a bit left. So you make this mistake, you fix it with that. You make that mistake, you fix it with this. That's parenting. There's no perfect parenting. It just doesn't work. You just keep trying to realign yourself as you navigate the waters of fantastical parenting. So yes, absolutely, we're not passing judgment, and we don't expect it ourselves to get it right, but we are looking for advice. We are ready to take on board where we can close. Claire, is that an unmute? Almost getting there.
Yep,
There you
yep. Pressing the wrong button. Well, it's just struck me. I don't know if Mrs. Abrahams just said this, but we should listen to what our children are saying to us.
go. Oh, you don't have to do that. Are you serious?
Yeah, truly. No, but I
I'm
don't
going to
mean just
listen to what
to
you're
the words.
saying and pray they can put it into it. So one second,
Yeah,
Claire, say it one more time. Say it one more time.
we should listen to what our children are saying to us. So it's not just the superficial words, it's trying to read the emotions that are behind it and what's really going on. There's a book out there called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. And it's having the patience to listen to what they've got to say. That's it. I don't know if that's good advice or not. I cannot say. I'm not
good.
an expert in child rearing,
Super
but
good. We've got two major pieces of advice. First, I'll be honest. And second of all, make sure we're listening. We're doing well. We're doing well. And I'm sure as we go through tonight, there'll be more ideas that pop up. Whether or not you feel comfortable unmuting, don't worry. At any point, please do. We're going to do a few psukim. Some of it we'll do inside, and some of it we'll just do the general gist. But the idea that we're going to learn is that Moshe Rabbeinu's role as a teacher is very important for us to take on board. Not because we're comparing ourselves to him, but we want to take his style on board as much as possible. Here's the opening psukim that we're going to focus on. Korach ben Yitzhak ben Kos ben Levi. This is the beginning of the rebellion. It's the beginning of the etc. Korach, the son of Yitzhak, the son of Kos, the son of Levi, took himself to a side, along with Dasan and Aviram, two no-gooders, the sons of Eliav, and On, the son of Peles, who were all descendants of Reuven. And Rashi points out that Gahas was on the same side of the Mishkan as Reuven's, and they had influenced each other because Gahas had been a neighbor of Reuven. They confronted Moshe alongside 250 men from the children of Israel, chieftains of the congregation. They were Chashva people, the representatives of the assembly, men of repute. They were top-notch 250 big hitters. They assembled against Moshe and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much for yourselves. For the entire congregation, everyone is holy, and God is among them. So why do you raise yourselves above God's people? Who needs a rebbe? Who needs Moshe? We're all okay. We all have our own connection. And in a way, he has a very valid point. Now, Korach rebels, arguing that since all Jews are God's children, there's no need for Moshe or for leadership at all. Now, if you think about it, in today's day and age, we have exactly the same feelings at times. When we talk about teenagers, this is very often the feeling a teenager feels like. Why can't I just figure out life on my own? Why do I need to have a parent, teacher, or whatever else? And the truth is, we all have a teenager inside of us, somewhere inside, and in certain areas, we resist and we feel like Korach. Now, don't forget, Korach himself, as well as all the people, had just a year earlier, less than a year probably, well, maybe a year earlier, stood at Mount Sinai and heard Hashem talk to them individually. Each one of us had heard it. And Moshe Korach turns to Moshe and says, why don't you trust us? Why do you insist on holding the reins and micromanaging everything? Moshe hears and he fell on his face. Moshe Rabbeinu had had to deal with the mess of Jewish people complaining and kicking and barakas a few times. But when the complaint is against Moshe himself and Moshe's role, he's pretty much got his hands tied behind his back. How is he going to stand up on behalf of Korach when Korach doesn't want him? And Moshe Rabbeinu falls on his face. He's like, how am I going to help? How am I going to turn this one round? How am I going to be able to bring Hashem round and make him feel okay with these type of people? And this people, he spoke to Korach and his company saying, in the morning, Hashem will make known and draw close to him those who are his and holy. The one he chooses, he will draw near to him. Moshe said to Korach, please listen, sons of Levi. It's not enough that Hashem of Israel has distinguished you from the entire congregation of Israel to draw you near to him. You're from Levi. You guys have a unique role yourself to perform the service in his tabernacle and to stand before the people, to minister to them. You guys have also been nominated, not because you chose or because I chose, but because Hashem chose you. He drew you near along with all your brothers, the sons of Levi, and now that's not enough for you. You seek the priesthood as well. Therefore, you and your entire assembly are uprising against Hashem. For what is Aaron that you should complain against him? Did Aaron choose to be the Kohen Gadol? Is your war against Aaron? Not at all. Your war is against the one who appointed Aaron. In other words, you are at war with Hashem. Just understand what you're saying, says Moshe. Moshe tries to shut them down, saying that Hashem will make clear whom he had chosen. The Parshah continues, Hashem spoke to Moshe and saying, disassociate from this congregation and I will destroy them in an instant. The earth beneath them split open. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them and their houses and all the men who were with Korach and all the property. They and all their possessions fell alive into the grave. The earth covered them up and they were lost to the nation. Clearly, Korach's idea was not good. Where everybody should be holy and everyone should be able to do what Moshe does is not a good idea. We need to have a Moshe, and we need to have the followers of Moshe. And Hashem punishes them by splitting the earth, which swallows them and all their possessions. Following that, Moshe, actually, sorry, it's not following that, it's previous to that, it's in last week's Bahaloischa, 2 weeks ago. Moshe is instructed to appoint 70 elders to assist him in leading the nation. If you remember the story when they complained against the man, Moshe Rabbeinu says these people are so difficult to lead, and Moshe Rabbeinu appoints 70 elders. I don't know if you remember, we spoke about the fact that there was 12 tribes. When you try and divide 70 into 12, it doesn't work. You need 72. And we remember we learned that there was 6 representatives who were going to become Moshe's support team from each tribe, but 2 tribes, or 2 people out of the 72 would not be included. There would only be 70. So 5 from 2 tribes, or 4 from 1 tribe. 2 people are going to drop. And the Pasuk describes, Hashem said to Moshe, assemble for me 70 men among the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the people's elders and officers, and take them to the tent of meeting, and they will stand there beside you. I will descend and speak to you there, and I will separate some of the spirit that is upon you, and bestow it upon them. Then they will bear the burden of the people with you, so you not bear it alone. So Moshe Rabbeinu is going to nominate his support team, and Hashem is going to ensure that these 70 elders will have some of the spirit from Moshe. 70 elders were endowed with prophecy, sharing Moshe's spirit. Now, the end of that story is that Moshe went out and told the people that Hashem had said. He assembled 70 men of the peoples of elders and stood them around the tent. And Hashem descended and the cloud spoke to him, and he separated some of Moshe's spirit and bestowed it on the 70 elders. And when the spirit rested upon them, these 70 elders prophesied once and then stopped. 70. Now, the other two who had been nominated but not taken on board, two men remained in the camp and didn't go out to the tent of meeting. One was Eldad and the other was Medad. And the Spirit continued to rest upon them. They were among those whose names Moshe had written, but they did not go out to the tent. Instead, they prophesied in the camp. Very important. Here you have prophecy, which is Hashem's communicating with people, but was without a line. Eldad and Medad were supposed to not be prophets. And them sharing prophecy without instruction is treason. Chas v'shalom, if a false prophet arises, it's a very, very terrible sin. But equally, if a prophet shares a prophecy that is not theirs, that is also treasonous. Because to communicate anything in the name of Hashem may only be done so when it's the right person communicating the message. So if two prophets show up and one steals the other's prophecy, that would be considered treason. Here you have Eldad and Medad, who weren't taken out to the camp, and they come forth and they say the prophecy without the permission of Moshe. Now you would imagine that if they are coming to undermine Moshe Rabbeinu's hierarchy of Moshe Rabbeinu, who he's nominating as his support team and leadership, then they are effectively undercutting Moshe Rabbeinu's power. And if that's the case, Moshe should be very upset that Eldad and Medad are doing what they're doing. They're sharing prophecy outside of what they were supposed to do. Well, that's exactly what Yeshua thought. Yeshua is Moshe Rabbeinu's right-hand man, his helper, and he rushes to Moshe. The lad ran and told Moshe, saying, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Yeshua, the son of Nun, Moshe's servant from his youth, responded and said, Moshe, my master, imprison them. Put them in their place. We've already know how important it is to have Moshe. And now we're in Parshas Korach. We can begin to understand how terrible it should look when you have people who are undermining Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership by undercutting and having their own prophecy instead of following Moshe's lead. Yet Moshe Rabbeinu's response is exactly the opposite. Verse 29, Pasuk of Tes, Moshe says back to Yeshua, Hamakanei atah li, are you zealous for my sake? Or mi yitain, if only all Hashem's people were prophets, that Hashem would bestow His Spirit upon them. If only every Yid was a prophet, how good would it be? Read that verse. Hear what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying. He wishes that it wasn't just Moshe Rabbeinu the prophet and the 70 he nominated, if only every Yid was a prophet. And here becomes the question. If Moshe encouraged Eldad and Medad, and he wished every Yid would also step up and become this holy prophet, why did he shut down Korach when he tried something similar? What did Korach say? Kala Eida Kulam Kadashim. Everyone is holy. Let everybody be a leader. Yet Eldad and Medad were praised as Korach is swallowed in the ground. And here we've kind of highlighted that when we look about what it means to be a Moshe Rabbeinu and to learn his skill of how he approached students, the next generation, how he looked to bring in and to get through to the next generation, this was super important. There's a difference with what Korach was doing compared to what Eldad and Medad was doing. One is highly praised and it's a wish. If only it would only happen, compared to Korach, which is terrible and has to be shut down at all costs. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to jump the gun a little bit. I'm going to say that Korach's challenge was to Moshe Rabbeinu's power, compared to Eldad and Medad, who had taken upon themselves to enhance Moshe Rabbeinu's influence. And for the rest of the next 9 minutes we have left, we want to discuss the difference between power and influence. Moshe Rabbeinu had both. He had tremendous influence and he also had tremendous power. The power of Moshe was given to him by Hashem, and it was only for Moshe. And when Moshe Rabbeinu had 70 elders, that wasn't to split or divide his power. That was in order to take care of something very different, to enhance his influence. And influence should be encouraged, compared to power should be retained and not diluted. That one of the key differences, okay, let's see. Hashem tells Moshe to point, okay, this is an example when Moshe Rabbeinu appoints Yeshua, and he appoints Yeshua to, you know what, let's read this. Let's read it. Hashem told Moshe to appoint Yeshua as the new leader of the congregation. We're jumping ahead, and we're using Moshe Rabbeinu appointing Yeshua as an example. And Moshe Rabbeinu was told to do two things. One thing is to lay his hands upon Yeshua. That's in verse 18. And the second thing is to bestow from his splendor upon Yeshua. And we're going to discover is that there's a difference between putting his hands upon Yeshua, and the other thing is to share from his splendor upon Yeshua. Samachtas Yod Chalav says the Midrash, laying hands is like lighting one candle from another. Compared to Nasata Mahoitcha, bestowing from splendor, is Kama'ar Mekli Lekli, pouring from one vessel to another. So if you have a cup full of delicious, I don't know, chocolate milk or whatever, Coca-Cola or orange juice, and you pour from your cup into another cup, you share it. Compared to laying one's hands upon a fellow person, as in smicha, that would be similar to lighting one candle to another candle. Now, before we flick the slide, anyone notice the difference between sharing light from one candle to another candle compared to sharing a delicious liquid pouring from one vessel into another vessel? What might be a key difference between these two objectives?
The first one, laying your hand upon somebody, lighting one candle from another. That's something that can carry on, and that's something, laying your hand upon him is what we do before Shabbos, etc. Bestow some of your splendor upon him could be momentary. It could be something that you do. It's power without anything else being behind it.
Okay, I like where we're going. We're well on track. I'm going to say, I just want to say a qualifier. We say lay your hand upon him in modern English language. To lay your hands on someone is not a good idea, right? Because that sounds like you're going to hit someone.
Oh, no, I was thinking of the lovely blessing. That, yeah.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned Friday night. Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But let's say, putting it into English, putting hands shares influence like lighting a candle. The more it's shared, the more it grows. Think about lighting one candle to many candles. With one candle, I lit 10 candles. I now have 10 shining lights. And that's what it means to share influence. Compared to power, sharing power, like pouring a drink, the more it's shared, the less it remains. So by pouring a cup of juice into someone else's, I've divided it into 2 cups, but each cup now only has half. So if we're talking about power, shared power is lessened power. Whereas influence, the more influence one has, the stronger the influence becomes. And as Mrs. Abrams says, the longer it will last, for the same reason. Because the influence only grows by being shared. And Moshe Rabbeinu had 2 roles. On the one hand, he had the role of setting the rules. On the other hand, he also had the role of influencing the people. Korach's challenge to Moshe was on whether or not Moshe should set the rules. Whether or not Moshe's rule setting is reliable, is sacred, is okay, and Korach came to challenge that. Compared to Elder Domeda's prophecy, their influence of holiness was exactly that. It was influence. And to this, Moshe Rabbeinu says, if only everybody was on board like these two, being able to influence others. Let's just flick a few sides because Moshe Rabbeinu's two roles actually have names. Moshe Rabbeinu was the Melech, he was the king, which in today's day and age would be the politicians. But in those days, he also had to do what politicians do today, decide on how to navigate the different influences and powers from the outside, and how to set up and establish what needs to be taking place on the inside, compared to also the second role Moshe Rabbeinu had, which was to be a nasi, which means to lead spiritually. And the spiritual leader isn't about setting the rules. The spiritual leader is the one who's going to empower. Now, it happens to be that throughout our history, Yiddishkeit always had both those roles, but always in two different people. It was two categories, the Nasi and the Melech. Hillel and his family were the true leaders of the Jewish people, even under the rule of the kings. The Sanhedrin, the yeshivas, the influence of spirituality were the real leaders compared to the kings. I mean, some examples that we have, even in the times of Agrippa was the king, Hillel's descendants were the ones who were the spiritual leaders. King uses his power to lead the people, to manage the land, and to fight wars. And as Shmuel HaNavi told the people, that the king's power is also a godly force, but that power is so important, it's not allowed to be divided. Melech is not allowed to be moichel on his kabit. A king is not allowed to forego his honor, because his honor is an important element in retaining his power. A king is not allowed to appear in front of the people when he's not dressed up. It's a mitzvah for the king to retain a position of power so that the people should be able to have a powerful leader. That's the king. One of the fascinating things about the king is that the king is never allowed to be included as a part of the Sanhedrin. First, the Supreme Court is established in the temple. This is called the Great Sanhedrin. The wise among them is appointed the chief. He acts as a dean in assembly. Whenever our sages to use the term Nasi, they are referring to this person. And this person who assumes the position of Moshe, our teacher. Note how the Rambam throws in for Moshe Rabbeinu a title. In the Hebrew, Moshe Rabbeinu. Why does he include the word Rabbeinu? Because all the different roles the Sanhedrin played, it plays the role of Moshe as a teacher, as a spiritual influencer. But as a king of Israel may not be included in the Sanhedrin. Why not? Not because we don't trust him, but because if the king says anything, nobody's allowed to disagree. And the Sanhedrin needs the input of the different rabbanim. A king of Israel may not be included in the Sanhedrin, for we are forbidden to disagree with him and repeat his words, and therefore you would have no Sanhedrin, you just have a lone voice. And that's why, very importantly, generally speaking, political and spiritual leadership are kept separate to prevent clashes between power and influence. Okay, we're going to say that Moshe Rabbeinu was our master, a king. He was also a teacher and also a king. It was a unique blend that was special to Moshe Rabbeinu. He was an exception. He served as king and nasi. And what we want to learn from this week's Sedra is that Moshe Rabbeinu in this week's Sedra stands his ground with Korach, with very strong force to tell Korach there's no option with challenging the king element of Moshe Rabbeinu. And for the same true, whatever is the rules are this way. But being a king itself is not yet enough. It's not yet an educator. And the king's role isn't to educate. But Moshe Rabbeinu has a different role. And Moshe Rabbeinu's other role is the role that we need to also very much incorporate. And we had some suggestions already here about making sure to be honest, making sure to be listening, but the role is to be an influencer. To be an influencer means not to use power to insist in a certain way, but to engage in a way of influence. And there's some fascinating quotes that we're not going to read right now about the Rebbe's influence on the world, where the Rebbe's power was zero. What would happen if someone turned around to the Rebbe and says, Rebbe, I don't want to listen to you. I'm not going to take what you say or your advice on board. Nothing. The Rebbe had no power. His office didn't have any power over the people. He's not going to get a dollar for tzedakah. You had people who did all sorts of wrong things, and they still came back. And the Rebbe still took him in and still gave them advice. The Rebbe's influence was exactly that, believing in the people, treasuring the people, not out of power, but out of appreciation for what that person is. I just want to end off with one story. I think it was Rebbe Zalman Jaffe, so it was a Manchester story, where he got advice from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him what he should or shouldn't do in business, and he didn't take the advice. And it went pear-shaped. And he got on a plane, and he came back to the Rebbe, and he said he needs advice because he didn't listen. I think before he said a mashal. He says the story of the town Ganav. And the town Ganav would go on Shabbos, jump into the chimneys of people's houses, climb down the chimney, be able to run off with the stone. And Shabbos, no one was up, and he would be able to be okay. Anyhow, his bad luck, one week, he jumps into a chimney, didn't realize it was the Rav's house. And as he pops down the chimney, the rabbi's right there in the study, and he's learning. He's literally caught red-handed. So the rabbi says, Yankel, what are you doing in my house? He says, Rabbi, I have a shaila, He says, what's the shaila? The shaila is, Vi krichman von da raus. How do you run away from this house? That's my shaila to the Rav. So the rabbi heard the story and he laughed. He says, Reb Zalman, I understand what you mean. I think it was Reb Zalman, it was someone else who said he understood he needed to by that. And the rabbi helped him. Why? Because the king's role is to set the rules. But the influencer's role is to work with the people. And when we have that, to understand that setting the rules is one role. But it's an entirely different role, which is to be an influencer. And that is the role of the teacher. And that is the role of the parent. We're on a whole different track. Shem should bench us that we should be able to be influencers into ourselves. And when we are very much a shining light to ourselves and those around us, the light itself will be the answer to our challenges. We should see the Rebbe take a miyad. And please God, Be'ez Hashem, this Gimel Tammuz will bring in Yerushalayim HaKodesh in 770 in Har HaBayis with the Rebbe showing Godless Kuret Wednesday evening. I think it's Nachum, whoever it is. Look out for the signs coming here, Rabbi Willem. You'll be glad you did. Thank you very much for joining and be